Hi, enjoy listening. The first thing Emily Harper learned about silence was that it never came alone. It brought shadows, echoes, and footsteps. They were coming again now, slow, measured. A rhythm too calm to be innocent. She shut her eyes tight. Vanessa. The sound of her heels striking the oak floors of the farmhouse hallway was unmistakable. Expensive shoes she wore like weapons. Emily could trace her movements without ever opening her eyes. First down the hall, then a pause outside the door. Then, click. The doorknob turned without hesitation. "I know you're awake, sweetheart," came Vanessa's voice. Sugary and sharp, like broken glass dipped in honey. "Don't pretend you're asleep. It's childish." Emily's heart pounded under the blanket pulled high up to her chin. She didn't speak. Didn't move. 6 months. 6 months since the accident. 6 months since the funeral. 6 months since she'd woken up in the hospital to find out her legs no longer worked, and that the only family she had left was a woman who, in Emily's words, married her dad for the wine cellar. But Vanessa wasn't pretending anymore. Not since the will had been read. She had laughed. Actually laughed the night she brought Emily home from the hospital. Emily remembered her words like they were tattooed inside her skull. "God, I really hoped you'd die. It would have made everything easier. But since you're determined to cling to life, we'll do this the hard way." At first, Emily thought the morphine was making her hallucinate. Surely no one could be that cruel. But Vanessa wasn't cruel. She was calculating. She controlled the nurses, the food, the pills. She put cameras in the hallways and locked the landline in her office. Emily's phone, gone. Wheelchair, gone. Only the hospital bed remained. A prison, with silk sheets and blackout curtains. And now she was here again, hovering in the doorway, like a queen checking on her hostage. "I've got news for you," Vanessa purred, stepping inside. Her voice dropped a tone. "I've hired someone new to take care of you. Your last nurse was, well, let's just say she started asking too many questions. That's always a mistake." Emily blinked. Her mouth tasted like rust. "What do you mean, someone new?" Vanessa smiled. "You'll meet him soon. He's a real catch. Out of prison less than a week. Long record. No job, no family, no future. But very strong." She paused for effect. "And very obedient. Just the kind of company you need, way out here, in the middle of nowhere." She leaned in close, her perfume nauseating. "Try not to scream too loud," she whispered. "The woods don't echo like they used to." Then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her. Emily stared at the ceiling. Her fingers clenched the blanket until her knuckles went white. The taste of fear was thick in her throat. But so was something else. Something older. Anger. 1 year ago, Emily Harper had been the happiest girl in her graduating class. 22, sharp as a blade. And halfway into her second semester of pre-law at Columbia, her dad, Richard Harper, was the kind of man people called a pillar of the community. He owned Harper and Locke Investments, the kind of firm that quietly ran small towns. And to Emily, he was simply Dad, her anchor, her hero. She never minded that it had always been just the two of them. Her mother had died before Emily's third birthday. Pneumonia, quick, cruel, and irreversible. But her father had filled the silence with warmth, bedtime stories, and pancakes on Sunday mornings. He was the kind of man who walked her to school wearing mismatched socks and a three-piece suit. The kind who never remarried until her. Vanessa Aldridge entered their lives like a sunset in reverse. Beautiful, glowing, and cold. Emily had tried to like her, truly. She was well-dressed, polite, full of the kind of charity work that made small-town newspapers print full spreads. Her smile never reached her eyes, but Emily thought maybe she just didn't know how to smile. And maybe, just maybe, her dad deserved someone. So when he stood beside her in the living room one Sunday night, holding Vanessa's hand and saying, "Pumpkin, we're getting married," Emily forced a smile and said all the right things. She didn't realize then that it was the beginning of the end. The morning of the accident had started like a dream. Emily had passed her LSATs on the first try, with high enough scores to make any law school take notice. Her father had offered to throw her a party or buy her a new car. "I don't need a car to prove I'm smart," she'd said, grinning. "Let me earn it. Just wait till I pass." She had. She ran out of the testing centre, screamed into the autumn wind, then drove to her dad's office to show him the official printout. A red Mustang sat in the driveway of the office. Her Mustang. A giant gold bow across the hood. She couldn't believe it. He hadn't waited. "You earned this the moment you decided to fight for it," he'd said, hugging her. They had taken it for a spin that very afternoon, just the two of them, the wind tangling in her hair. The stereo blasting Queen. Emily drove like she had wings. Out of the city, down the winding roads, through the hills. She glanced at her dad. "So, how am I doing, officially licensed driver?" He smiled. "You're a Harper. That means excellent. But stay focused." And then, it happened fast. Too fast. From the curve ahead came the screech of brakes, the roar of a diesel engine. A semi swerved out of nowhere, jackknifing into their lane. Emily slammed the brake. Nothing. Her foot sank straight to the floor. "Dad!" He grabbed the wheel, swerved hard. His side took the hit. Metal screamed. Glass exploded. And then, nothing. She woke up in the hospital, with a ventilator in her throat, and a woman she barely knew stroking her hair. "Emily," Vanessa whispered. "Thank God you're alive." It was a week before she was told her father was dead. It was another week before she learned her spine was broken. And only after she was transferred home did the final blow fall. The brakes on her car had failed, and no one could explain why. But Vanessa could. "Oh, sweetheart," she had said softly, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's forehead. "I just hope you know it should have been you." Jack Monroe hadn't meant to get out early. Prison wasn't a place where miracles happened. But after 7 years of silence, the truth had finally clawed its way out. And he was released on a technicality that felt more like a sick joke than a victory. He had no home, no friends left to call, no one waiting outside the gates with open arms or even a cup of coffee. Just a duffel bag, $32, and a bus ticket to nowhere. So he didn't ask questions when the woman with red lipstick and a cashmere coat found him sitting outside a gas station near Route 48, eyes red from wind and hunger. She stepped out of a luxury SUV like she didn't belong in the real world, heels crunching the gravel, smile sharp as a blade. "You look like you could use a job," she said simply. Jack had been about to ask for spare change. Instead, he nodded. "Yeah, you could say that." She appraised him like a piece of furniture. Strong, quiet, and disposable, I assume. He didn't flinch. "Depends who's asking. I'm Vanessa Harper. I have a large country home that needs a caretaker. Live-in position. My stepdaughter is disabled and requires supervision. You won't have to do much. Just make sure she eats, doesn't fall, and stays put. You'll have your own room, meals included, no visitors, no drinking, and no questions." Jack rubbed his jaw. His last job offer had come from a guy in a halfway house who wanted him to fix fights for cash. "What's the pay?" he asked. $1,500 a week, she said, like it meant nothing to her. He stared. "I need someone who can follow instructions," she added, "and who isn't afraid of a little mess." She handed him a folded slip of paper with an address. "Be there by 5 p.m. Don't be late." He took the paper. She got back in her car and vanished down the road, taillights fading into the fog. That's how Jack Monroe, ex-con, ex-surgeon, ex-everything, came to stand at the edge of a gated estate, surrounded by woods and silence. The Harper home looked more like a private inn than a residence. 2 stories, stone foundation, wraparound porch, and the kind of solitude you couldn't buy in the city. No cars in sight, no neighbors for miles, no second chances in reach. He rang the doorbell. Vanessa answered in leggings and pearls. "You're early." "Good. That means you know how to follow orders." She led him through the marble floor foyer, past chandeliers and oil paintings that screamed old money. But the house felt cold. Not just temperature. Cold like a hospital with no patients, no soul. "She's upstairs," Vanessa said, gesturing vaguely. "East wing, 3rd door. Don't expect conversation. She's difficult, but I'm sure a man like you can handle that. Jack said nothing. She handed him a key. You'll find your room next to hers. You'll be watched. Don't mistake this for trust. Then she turned and disappeared down the hallway like she had more important things to do. Like ruin someone else's life. He climbed the stairs, footsteps silent. Third door. He knocked. No answer. Jack opened the door and stepped inside. And there she was. She led him through the marble-floored foyer, past chandeliers and oil paintings that screamed old money. But the house felt cold. Not just temperature. Cold like a hospital with no patients, no soul. She's upstairs, Vanessa said, gesturing vaguely. East wing, third door. Don't expect conversation. She's difficult. But I'm sure a man like you can handle that. Jack said nothing. She handed him a key. You'll find your room next to hers. You'll be watched. Don't mistake this for trust. Then she turned and disappeared down the hallway, like she had more important things to do. Like ruin someone else's life. He climbed the stairs, footsteps silent. Third door. He knocked. No answer. Jack opened the door and stepped inside. And there she was. He was tall, strong, scarred, and for the first time in months had looked her in the eyes and not flinched. Jack didn't hover. He didn't bark orders. He didn't ask why there were no other nurses, why she couldn't sit up, or why there were tiny cameras blinking red from the corners of the room. He just stood there, like he had all the time in the world. You always lie like that? He asked eventually, nodding toward her motionless body. Emily stared. What do you care? Jack gave a faint shrug. Just wondering if you're stuck or stubborn. That got her attention. She narrowed her eyes, cheeks flushing. I'm paralyzed. Not what the chart in your dad's office says. She blinked. You were in my dad's office. I was told to settle in. I found the study unlocked. Emily's pulse jumped. Vanessa never let anyone into her father's study. Not since the accident. You read my medical files? Just glanced. He scratched the back of his neck. I'm interested in that sort of thing. Emily stared. Something about the way he said it didn't sound like small talk. Who are you? She asked. Jack hesitated. Then, let's just say I'm someone who doesn't like to see people being lied to. He moved toward the windows, pulled the curtains halfway open. Sunlight spilled into the room, like a flood, lighting her face for the first time in days. She winced and turned away. Jack stepped back. Sorry, didn't mean to blind you. She didn't respond. Then he walked out, just like that. 10 minutes later, he came back pushing a rolling tray. On it was a plate of scrambled eggs, 2 pieces of toast, and a glass of orange juice. No cameras in the kitchen, he said simply. I made this myself. You can refuse if you're afraid I poisoned it. Emily lifted an eyebrow. Is that supposed to be comforting? No, Jack replied. "But at least it's honest." He helped her sit up, gently, respectfully, the way a nurse would, the way a human would. Not once did his hands linger or his eyes stray. When she tasted the eggs, something strange happened. She teared up. They were warm, seasoned, normal. She hadn't tasted normal in a long, long time. Jack sat in the chair across from her and lowered the TV volume. "So," he said, watching her over a chipped mug of coffee, "how'd you get stuck with Lady Macbeth downstairs?" Emily nearly choked on her toast. And just like that, something cracked. She found herself talking, slowly, cautiously at first, then faster. She told him about her father, about the accident, about how the brakes failed, about the inheritance clause that said she wouldn't get a dime if she didn't make it to her 21st birthday, about the cameras, the silence, the slow decay of her mind and body. He didn't interrupt, not once. When she finally fell quiet, Jack nodded. "Sounds like a hell of a setup," he said. "She wants me dead." "Yeah," he said. "I got that." Emily looked at him. "So why are you here? Why did she hire you?" Jack stood, walked to the window. "Because I'm a ghost, Emily. Because the system chewed me up and spat me out, and no one wants to touch a man with a murder conviction." He turned. For the first time there was weight in his eyes. Not pity, pain. "She found me on a curb, offered me a room and a reason. I didn't ask questions. I should have." Emily's voice dropped. "Did you really kill someone?" Jack met her eyes. "No." Then he walked to the door. "But I let the wrong people protect their money, and 6 people died because of it. I lived with it for 7 years, and I'll live with it until I stop breathing." He left her there, not out of cruelty, but something closer to respect. And when the door shut behind him, Emily realized something strange. She didn't feel alone. Jack waited until after midnight. The house was dark, save for the flickering blue glow from the hallway camera. Vanessa had left earlier that evening in a designer coat and with a glass of wine in hand, mumbling something about a charity function in Albany. Jack didn't believe her. He figured even snakes needed a place to shed. He moved quietly, bare feet on polished wood, and slipped into Richard Harper's study. The lock had long since been disabled. Vanessa must have figured no one would dare poke around. The second drawer held what he was looking for, a manila folder marked Emily Harper, Post-Accident Records. Jack sat at the desk and flipped it open. The records were detailed: X-rays, spinal scans, surgery reports, post-op assessments. But something didn't sit right. The prognosis said severe spinal trauma, limited motor function likely, movement possible with rehabilitation and assisted therapy. Emily had never been told that. Every doctor's note was signed by Dr. R. Kingsley. the same physician who had testified at Jack's trial, and the same one later arrested for falsifying drug testing records. Jack swore under his breath. He looked deeper into the financials tucked behind the file. There it was, an insurance payout, hefty and fast-tracked, transferred to an offshore account under VA Holdings, which matched Vanessa's maiden name, Aldridge. He snapped a photo of the document with his burner phone and kept digging. Then he found something he didn't expect, a sealed envelope addressed to David Chandler. He paused. Emily had mentioned him in passing, a close friend of her father's, someone she hadn't seen since the accident, someone Vanessa wouldn't allow near the house. The letter was dated 2 weeks before the crash. Jack unfolded it. David, I don't know what Vanessa's game is, but something's off. She's pushing me to make changes to the will. She says it's just for security, but she's evasive about the details. I've asked my lawyers to prepare a second version of the will, one that ensures Emily is protected. Featured. Jack stared at the page. A storm churned in his gut. This wasn't just a greedy widow angling for money. This was a setup, a plan, and Emily was the only thing standing between Vanessa and a fortune. The next morning, Jack entered Emily's room with coffee and a worn paperback copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, something to keep her company. She was already awake, staring at the ceiling. Sleep okay? He asked. Emily shrugged. Nightmares, mostly. Jack sat beside her. Do you know the code? No. He was a retired sheriff, though. Used to joke about his badge number being the only thing he never forgot. Jack smiled faintly. That might be enough. Emily's breath caught. You found something? He nodded. Emily, I think she's been planning this for longer than you know. And your dad knew it too. She looked down, her voice small. So I'm not crazy? Jack leaned forward, met her eyes. You were never crazy, just outnumbered. That night, with Emily's permission, Jack opened. It was more than enough. Jack slid the documents into a messenger bag and stepped into the hallway. He had someone to call. Someone who might just be able to burn the whole house of lies to the ground. Jack didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window in his room, the USB drive clenched in his fist, staring out at the tree line beyond the property. The stars above Cedar Hill blinked cold and distant. Below, the house pulsed with secrets, the kind that didn't stay buried forever. By morning, he had made a choice. Emily was already awake when he entered her room. She didn't look startled anymore when he opened the door. In fact, she looked like she'd been waiting. Morning, he said softly, setting a thermos of coffee beside her. You didn't sleep. Jack raised an eyebrow. How would you know? You walk like someone who's carrying the weight of a dead city, she said. He let out a breath, not quite a laugh. You always talk like that? She shrugged. It's the books. He pulled the chair closer. You want the truth? Emily nodded. All of it. So Jack told her about the operating room, about the little boy with a tumor behind his eye, about the hospital that ordered him to cut corners to save time, about how he said yes, just once, because his supervisor signed off. About how the boy never woke up. About how Jack took the fall, while the rest walk free, with bonuses and clean hands. He didn't cry, but his voice went quiet when he said, "I signed the release papers. I knew what they wanted, and I still did it. That makes me guilty, doesn't it?" Emily was silent. Then, "No, it makes you human." Jack looked at her, startled. She held his gaze. "You weren't evil. You were scared, and people paid for it. That's not murder. That's a system that breaks good people." He exhaled, like she'd just lifted a 2-ton stone off his back. For a long time they just sat there, listening to the wind press against the windows. Then she said, "So what do we do now?" Jack hesitated. "I have a friend, a reporter. She owes me a favor. If I send her this drive and those letters, she'll run the story. Everything. But we'll need to get you out of here first." Emily's eyes flickered. "Vanessa won't let that happen." "I know," Jack said. "But we don't ask her." She grinned, and it caught him off guard. A real grin, mischievous and raw. "I haven't left this house in over a year." "Then it's time," he said. "Time to remind the world you exist." They spent the day planning. Jack studied the floor plan, the shift patterns of the groundskeeper, the blind spots between the cameras. Emily directed him to the breaker box and the old back entrance her father used to use when he forgot his keys. That evening, while Vanessa was still out drinking herself into another version of reality, Jack wheeled Emily into the downstairs sunroom. It was dusty and unused, but the back door still opened smoothly. "Ready?" he asked. Emily's face tightened. "I'm scared." He knelt beside her. "Good. Means you're still alive." They moved fast. Through the door, across the garden path, into the trees. The forest was thick with summer growth, but Jack knew the road wasn't far. Every step felt like a heartbeat. At the edge of the woods, Jack flagged down a delivery van. The driver, young and bored, didn't even blink when Jack flashed a $100 bill and said, "Emergency, need to get her into town, fast." They climbed in. As the van rumbled away, Emily looked back at the only home she'd ever known. The windows of Cedar Hill stared back like hollow eyes. She reached for Jack. Then Emily said, "Do you think she'll come after us?" Jack nodded, yes. "And do you think we'll be okay?" He looked at her. Really looked. "You survived her this long," he said. "You're already stronger than she'll ever be." Emily leaned her head on his shoulder, eyes closing slowly. "Then maybe I'm not as broken as I thought." "No," Jack whispered. "You're just waiting to heal." The story broke 3 days later. Former sheriff's daughter, imprisoned in estate for inheritance. Whistleblower exposes years of abuse. It ran front page on the Ledger, then got picked up by national outlets. Photos of Emily, frail, pale but sitting upright, filled the sidebars. The article quoted an anonymous source who had access to medical records, legal documents, and eyewitness accounts. Jack watched her face as she read. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. But her fingers trembled slightly as they hovered above the screen. The only thing they had to do now was wait. That night, as the wind howled through the cracks in the old windows, Jack sat on the porch steps with a thermos of coffee, watching the trees shift in the moonlight. He didn't hear the car until it was almost too late. Headlights slashed through the woods like knives. A black SUV, sleek and humming, pulled to a slow stop at the bottom of the gravel path. Jack stood. He didn't need to see the driver to know who it was. Vanessa. She stepped out in heels, her blonde hair perfect even in the wind, her coat like a cape in the breeze, and in her hand, a pistol, small and gleaming. "You thought you could humiliate me," she hissed across the clearing. "You think anyone will believe a washed-up murderer and a mute little cripple who's been spoon-fed pity?" Jack stepped down, blocking the front door with his body. "Try me," he said. Vanessa's smile cracked. "You think I won't? I've sacrificed everything for that estate, for what I deserve. You don't get to waltz in and rip it away." "You sacrificed nothing," Jack said calmly. "You stole from her, from a dead man. You lived off someone else's love and called it your own." Her hand shook. The gun wavered. Behind him, the cabin door creaked open. Emily stood in the shadows, holding onto the doorframe for balance. She wasn't in a wheelchair. She was standing. Barely, but standing. "Go ahead," she called out, her voice dry but clear. "Shoot. Just know the whole world is watching now." Vanessa's eyes snapped toward her. "You don't have the guts," Emily said. "You never did. You just pay other people to do your dirty work." The gun dropped an inch. "You don't know anything, you spoiled little freak. I know my father loved me, and he feared you." Emily stepped forward. "You know what he told me once? That real power isn't control, it's protection. You only ever wanted control." Vanessa hesitated. For a long moment, the three of them stood locked in silence. The past, the present, and the ugly truth between them. Then, from the woods, came the crunch of boots. 3 officers in plain clothes emerged, guns drawn. "Put the weapon down!" the lead one barked. Vanessa froze. Her eyes went wide. Then, finally, the gun slipped from her fingers and landed in the gravel. They cuffed her without ceremony. Jack and Emily stood still, not speaking, as she was led to the SUV. Vanessa, "You stood," he whispered. She nodded. "I've been practicing, in secret, just to know I still could." Jack swallowed the lump in his throat. "I never should have let you face her alone." "You didn't," she said. "You stood with me." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hand. They sat in silence as the fire crackled, warmth slowly returning to their limbs. and their hearts. Somewhere far away, the world spun on. But inside that cabin, two broken people had stopped running. The morning after Vanessa's arrest, the world felt still. Snow, unseasonal, unexpected, fell gently on the cabin's roof, covering the trees in a soft, weightless hush. Emily sat by the window, her legs propped on a cushion, a wool blanket draped around her shoulders like a shawl. Jack brought her tea. No words, just a nod. Something had shifted between them. Not love, not yet, but something quieter, deeper. Trust. She opened the small wooden box that had been in her lap all morning. Jack hadn't asked what was in it. He just knew it mattered. Inside were dozens of folded papers, some yellowed, some fresh, all addressed to the same name, Dad. Emily held one up and began to read aloud, voice thin but steady. March 4th, the year you left me. I spent the whole day in the music room, not playing, just remembering your voice humming along to Chopin. Vanessa says it's a waste of time now, but I think you'd want me to keep listening, even if the keys stay silent. I miss you. I miss your laugh. I miss how you always smelled like engine oil and aftershave. Some days, I still think you're going to come home. Emily. Jack sat beside her without speaking. She passed him another note. June 12th. Vanessa took away my physical therapy, said the money was better spent on real priorities. I tried not to cry, but she noticed. She always notices. Sometimes I wonder if she knows I remember that night. I don't think it was an accident, Dad. I think she wanted you gone, and that terrifies me. Love, your girl. She stopped, throat closing. Jack reached out, slowly, and took her hand. You remembered everything, didn't you? Emily nodded. I saw the look on her face after the crash. It wasn't grief. It was satisfaction. A silence grew between them, thick but not heavy. Then Jack said, Would you want to send these? She blinked. To where? He shrugged. Doesn't matter. Post them to the wind. Burn them. Leave them under the old tree. Just maybe letting them go means you get to keep what matters. She looked down at the letters. I don't know if I'm ready. That's okay, he said. Take your time. Healing's not a deadline. They sat for a long while, snow falling steadily outside. Later, when Jack went to prepare lunch, Emily wheeled herself out to the back porch. She held one letter in her lap, the first one she ever wrote, barely a week after the funeral. The paper was soft with age, corners torn. She struck a match, watched the flame curl the edge, and whispered, Thank you for loving me when no one else did. She let it burn all the way down. The ashes lifted on a breeze, carrying the weight of the words to a sky that just might still be listening. It was late February when Jack and Emily drove back up the winding road towards Cedar Hill. The sky was low and grey, pressing down on the bare branches like a weight. Snow still lingered in patches, making the long driveway slick with ice. Emily stared out the window, her hands clenched in her lap. It looks smaller than I remember. Jack glanced over. Maybe it is. Or maybe it was just the shadows that made the house seem bigger before. Vanessa's arrest had sparked a legal firestorm. The courts moved quickly to freeze the estate's assets. The company Vanessa had controlled was being dismantled, and the truth about Richard Harper's last will was becoming clear. Emily was named the rightful heir, but with a long road of litigation ahead. They parked near the front steps. Emily took a deep breath. "I'm scared." Jack smiled softly. "Me too. But sometimes facing fear means taking the first step." The door was unlocked. Dust coated the floor like a thick blanket. The air smelled of old wood, forgotten memories, and something faintly metallic. As Emily wheeled herself inside, Jack flipped on the lights. The walls were lined with family photos, some faded, some freshly covered in dust. The grand piano stood silent in the corner, a ghost of melodies past. She paused before a portrait of her father. He looked younger there, smiling, alive. Jack came to her side. "You ready to start cleaning?" She nodded. Days passed in a haze of sorting, filing, and uncovering. Among the clutter, they found letters Vanessa had hidden, documents proving her financial manipulations, forged signatures, and forged medical reports. Emily's lawyer assured her the case was solid, but the house held other secrets. In the basement, behind a false panel, Jack uncovered a small safe. Inside, a bundle of letters and a leather-bound journal, Richard's journal. Emily opened the worn pages. The entries spoke of love, regret, and a desperate hope to protect his daughter. One passage caught her eye. "If Vanessa ever turns, Emily must know the truth, that her strength is in the love we share. Not in the walls, she cannot escape." Tears filled Emily's eyes. Jack squeezed her hand. "Home isn't just a place," he said. "It's the people we carry with us." Emily looked around the empty house. Maybe, just maybe, this was where healing would begin. Spring was slowly stirring Cedar Hill awake. The snow had melted into muddy earth, and the first green shoots pushed through the thawed ground. The house, once cold and silent, now echoed with movement. Footsteps, laughter, and the creak of settling floors. Emily stood in the sunroom, the place where she had first tasted freedom. Jack was nearby, unpacking boxes labelled memories, books, and plans. They worked side by side, turning the house into a home. The days weren't easy. Pain still lingered in Emily's legs, and the shadow of Vanessa's cruelty sometimes darkened her thoughts. But now she wasn't alone. Jack's quiet strength was a steady flame. One afternoon, As Emily adjusted the curtains, she noticed a letter on the windowsill. The last one she had burned, now returned, carefully pressed between the pages of her father's journal. She smiled, tracing the faded ink. Love, loss and survival, stitched together in fragile paper and stronger hearts. That evening, with the sun dipping low, Jack brought out his guitar. He strummed a soft melody, hesitant at first, then sure. Emily listened, eyes closed. In the music, she heard a promise, not just of healing, but life, living together. The house on Cedar Hill was no longer a prison. It was a beginning. If you like the story, I would be very happy to have your support. Click the thumbs up. And to not miss new stories, subscribe and click on the bell. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and all the best.